For example, at the end of World War II, or just at the end of it, Germany could not import goods without payment in gold. The person who shipped the goods in would accept the gold and didn't care if there's any credit extended associated with that.
Right. Well, I'm sure with comments like that will be turning you into a rock star amongst the gold bar community. In fact, you'll probably be trending on Twitter today.
And the question is, why do central banks put money into an asset which has no rate of return, but cost of storage and insurance and everything else like that? Why are they doing that? If you look at the data, with a very few exceptions, all of the developed countries have gold reserves. Why?
I imagine right now it's because of a question mark hanging over the value of fiat currency or the credibility going forward.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. Every time you get some really serious question, the 50% of the gold price determination begins to move.
Quote, I view gold as the primary global currency. It is the only currency, along with silver, that does not require a counterparty signature or a liability for somebody else.
But do you think that gold is currently a good investment given what you're saying about the potential for turmoil?
Yes.
Do you put...
Economists are usually perfect in equivocating. In this case, I didn't equivocate. Look, remember what we're looking at. Gold is a currency. It is still, by all evidence, the premier currency where no fiat currency, including the dollar, can match it. And so that the issue is, if you're looking at the question of turmoil, you will find, as we always have in the past, it moves into the gold price.
Greenspan has also said, quote, an almost hysterical antagonism toward the gold standard is one issue which unites statists of all persuasions. They seem to sense that gold and economic freedom are inseparable. So let's look at Alan Greenspan. He's probably the most famous economist in American history. He was appointed chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank by President Ronald Reagan in the late 80s. For those of you who don't know what the Federal Reserve is, it's effectively the central bank of the United States, which means it governs monetary supply and monetary policy. It's also called the lender of last resort, or the banker to the banks, because the Federal Reserve can lend money to the banks when they don't have anywhere else to borrow from. So Alan Greenspan served as chairman of the Federal Reserve Central Bank under President Reagan, President George H.W. Bush, President Bill Clinton, and President George W. Bush. And Greenspan was famous for predicting the financial crisis of 2008, forecasting that the housing market was a bubble and would crash worse than anybody else was expecting, which of course he was right about. Alan Greenspan has also been outspoken in his views about gold and silver. He said, in the absence of the gold standard, there is no way to protect savings from confiscation through inflation. There is no safe store of value. Deficit spending is simply a scheme for the hidden confiscation of wealth. Gold stands in the way of this insidious process. He's also said, quote, gold is a currency. It is still, by all evidence, a premier currency where no fiat currency, including the US dollar, can match it. He said, quote, gold still represents the ultimate form of payment in the world. He said, if all currencies are moving up or down together, the question is relative to what? Gold is the canary in the coal mine. It signals problems with respect to currency markets. Greenspan has also said, fiat money has no intrinsic value and is backed by no tangible asset. When governments fall into the practice of issuing unrestricted paper money, with the result that not enough currency is available on demand, inflation inescapably ensues. I do think gold is a good place to put money these days, given its value as a currency outside of the policies conducted by governments.
But the gold price is actually sort of half a commodity price. So when the economy is weakening, it goes down like copper. But it's also got a monetary characteristic, which is intrinsic. It's not inbred into human beings. I cannot conceive of any mechanism by which you could say that, but it behaves as though it is. Intrinsic currencies like gold and silver, for example, are acceptable without a third-party guarantee. And for example, at the end of World War II, or just at the end of it, Germany could not import goods without payment in gold. The person who shipped the goods in would accept the gold and didn't care if there's any credit extended associated with it. That is a very rare phenomenon. It's the reason why, for example, in a renewal of an agreement that the central banks have made, European central banks, I believe, about allocating their gold sales, which occurred when gold prices were falling down, that has been renewed this year with a statement that gold serves a very important place in monetary reserves. And the question is, why do central banks put money into an asset which has no rate of return, but cost of storage and insurance and everything else like that? Why are they doing that? If you look at the data, with a very few exceptions, all of the developed countries have gold reserves. Why?
Well, I imagine right now it's because of a question mark hanging over the value of fiat currency or the credibility going forward.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. Every time you get some really serious question, the 50% of the gold price determination begins to move.
Right.
And I think it is fascinating. I don't know, is Ben Steele in the audience?
Yes.
There he is, okay. Before you read my book, go read Ben's book. The reason is you'll find it fascinating on exactly this issue, because here you had the ultimate test at the Mount Washington Hotel in 1944 of the real intellectual debate between those who wanted an international fiat currency, which was embodied in John Maynard Keynes' construct of a bank corps, and he was there in 1944, holding forth with all of his prestige, but couldn't counter the fact that the United States dollar was convertible into gold, and that was a major draw. Everyone wanted America's gold, and I think that Ben really described that in extraordinarily useful terms as far as I can see. Anyway, thank you.
Right. Well, I'm sure with comments like that, that will be turning you into a rock star amongst the gold bug community. In fact, you'll probably be trending on Twitter today.